Hello everyone, welcome to another Narc Survivor live video. In this one I'm going to be talking about how you can beat a narcissist. Because of course this is something that narcissists are very concerned with. To them it's all about winning. It's all about getting as much out of you as they can and having as many people on their side as possible and just getting the best outcome for themselves, regardless of how it affects you. So that's their idea of winning. And of course, this comes from their arrested emotional development of just what happened to them in their childhood through the abuse, the neglect, to where they always wanted to be in a superior or advantageous position over someone, regardless of how they're treating them or how it affects them. So that's really the concern for the narcissist, and that's what's most important for them. But for us, what we should be focused on is more protecting ourselves and maintaining our emotional well-being, because that's going to be what's best for us. And the best place to start is with our boundaries. Having strong boundaries that protect us, because the narcissist will push your boundaries to manipulate you. So if you have strong boundaries in place to protect you against them, and you're consistent and firm in enforcing these limits, that will then help to prevent your emotional exhaustion and to maintain your self-respect, which they try to push against. Because narcissists will provoke you. They do want to manipulate certain reactions out of you in order to maintain control. And that's how we can beat them, by practicing emotional detachment. Because our emotions are their food. It's what keeps them going. It's their narcissistic supply. So if you withhold your emotions, your reactions from the narcissist, they're going to go somewhere else to get that supply, to get those reactions. Because then they're going to know that they're not getting that from you when you set these boundaries with them. And it will reduce their power over you. Of course, this can be very difficult for us as empaths, because naturally we are reactive, we are emotional. So it can be very difficult. But once we practice having this emotional detachment, they will then lose their power over us. Because of course, I mean, we know what they like to do. Initially, they might love bomb you. They might put you up on a pedestal, they might compliment you and give you positive reinforcement. But then once they've got you hooked, then they turn against you, then they start devaluing you as a source of power as well. And that's why it's good to practice emotional detachment. Use the grey rock technique. Observe, don't absorb. That's one of the best ways to beat a narcissist. But also what I would advise, and I haven't seen many other coaches advising this, but what I highly recommend is that you don't just cut off your emotions immediately. Because of course, narcissists are not stupid. They're going to catch on. They're going to realize that you're pulling back on your emotions, that you're not reacting to them in the same way that you used to. And then, of course, what they're going to do is ramp it up to test you and to see if they can get you to react again. But then if you gradually reduce the emotional intensity gradually over a period of time, then they may not notice it as much. So that's what I advise, instead of just immediately going grey rock. And just stay out of the power struggle, because they thrive on control and domination. So they're always trying to pull you into this emotional minefield where so many things can just set them off. And of course, by us engaging in these power struggles, which is something that narcissists have engaged in their entire lives, and when we get involved in that, it just leads to frustration and more manipulation, because we're not experts at that. We haven't got a lifetime of experience at manipulating, controlling, and dominating people. So of course, they're always going to win in that arena. And that's why they want to get us. They want to pull us into that space, because they already know that they are the masters at that. They're the masters at dominating and controlling people. They've been doing that their entire lives. They were doing that when they were children with their parents. And they don't feel bad about it. They don't feel any remorse. So this is why the best thing we can do is to stay out of that emotional wrestling ring. Avoid battling out with them. Avoid getting in the mud, because they're always going to win in that arena. So to beat them, we just stay out of it. We just don't play their game. Don't play the game that they are already masters at. The game that they've been playing their entire lives. The game that you're just a beginner, an amateur at. Of course they're going to beat you in that emotional wrestling ring. Of course you're not going to be able to win those arguments, because they will deny, project, blame shift, gaslight. They will use all of these different tactics. And eventually what's going to happen is, inevitably, you will end up being subservient to them, and they will have power over you, because they're masters at the fake. They're masters at manipulation. Now, of course, if it's a battle of authenticity, genuineness, then you're going to win. But they don't want to battle you with that. They want everything to be covert, manipulative, because that's where they will win. That's where they know that you will lose, because you're real, you're genuine, you're authentic. So of course, a sincere, genuine person is not going to survive in that type of dynamic. And that's why you just stay out of the power struggles. And also document, keep a record of all interactions, and seek support. You can book a one-on-one with me on my website. It's narcsurvivor.co.uk. And also there's BetterHelp as well. It's betterhelp.com/narcsurvivor. Using that link helps to support our community. But to beat a narcissist, you've got to know when to walk away. You've got to know when to go no contact. Because you're never going to outdo them in being toxic, in being dysfunctional. You're never going to beat them at that. Even I myself, with all of my years of experience with narcissists, all of my years of research, I couldn't beat them at being toxic or dysfunctional. Even though I may have witnessed more toxicity, more dysfunction than so many people, and maybe than so many narcissists. But I still could not surpass them or beat them in that. It would be very draining for me. But for them, that's what gives them fuel. That's what they thrive on. So they want to get you into that wrestling ring. They want to battle it out with you. Well, for you, what's going to be best for you, what's going to help you to beat the narcissist, is by going no contact. Just being away from them. That's going to be good for you, but it's not going to be good for them. They want to get as close to you as they possibly can, so that they can then have the advantage over you. They don't have any advantage by being by themselves. We do. We have an incredible advantage by being alone. We can make incredible things happen just by being away from them. But as for them, they're at a huge disadvantage by being away from us, because we are their life force, we are their supply. So not much is going to happen for them by being away from us. But it is a win for us by going no contact. And you don't have to confront them directly. I mean, you got to think, they lack self-awareness. They're never really going to understand. So instead, you just need to control how you're responding to them. Don't reveal too much to them. Don't be vulnerable. And instead, just maintain your own sense of power and peace. Because that's what they want to take from you. They want to deprive you of your sense of power. They want to destroy your peace. And it's because there's no peace for them. There's never going to be any peace for them in their minds. But there's so much peace for you just by walking away. And that's why they've got to disrupt the peace. Because they're jealous of that. They're jealous how things are so peaceful for you and not for them. And that's why you're the one who wins by cutting them off. You're the one who wins by going no contact. You're the one who gets to find power and peace. Because they're the ones who are toxic. And of course, their greatest punishment is just to be alone by themselves. Or even just to be left to the other low-quality people that they surround themselves with. They're enablers and flying monkeys. That's why they all target you. That's why they run smear campaigns against you. Because you're the one with the power. You're the one with the peace. And they want to get that from you. But for us, we win by creating distance. They win by getting as close to us as they possibly can. We win by creating distance. Emotionally and physically. Because you get emotionally involved with them and they will deplete you. They will drain you of your energy. Because they thrive on your attention, admiration, and emotional reactions. But they have no attention, admiration, or emotions to give to you because they're self-absorbed and they lack empathy. So they're going to be feeding off your attention and everything you're giving to them. But then there's nothing to reciprocate back to you. And this is how, when people get involved with narcissists, they then start losing their identity. Because you're constantly noticing them, you're attending to them, you're giving them everything that they need, you're being everything they want you to be for them. But they're not being who you need them to be for you. So there's no reciprocation, there's no equal exchange, and it just depletes you. And you become less and less like yourself the more that you're around them. Because they just focus on everything negative about you. They never focus on your efforts or your accomplishments. And this is how it's so dangerous to be around them, because they can erase you. They can erase your identity because they have no identity of their own. They have no sense of self. And this is why it's so beneficial to detach yourself from them by setting boundaries and disengaging emotionally. Because by doing that, you then reduce their power over you. And their power over you is not going to result in anything good. So that's why it's best to just sever ties. Because they feed off your emotional responses. But by you staying emotionally detached, you are then robbing them of this fuel, of this narcissistic supply that they need to thrive. So once they recognize this, they may try to make you angry. They may try to provoke you, or they may play the victim to try and evoke sympathy. Typically, it's going to be one of the two. It's going to be provoking anger or sympathy to get a reaction out of you, because then that gives them that fuel. It gives them that narcissistic supply, which they feed off, which they need to survive. Because otherwise, there's just so much chaos and turmoil in their minds. There's no peace, and that's why they're never at rest. They're constantly just pushing your buttons, trying to get that peace and power from you. That's naturally yours. But you win by remaining calm and unaffected, because then they lose their influence over you. And you then regain control over the situation. And this is why it's important to set firm boundaries. Because narcissists, they're notorious for violating personal boundaries to maintain control. But when you set clear, firm boundaries, you are then preventing them from intruding on your life and emotions. And, that's what they have to do, because you as the empath, they get supply from you, you fuel them, you give them a sense of peace, a sense of power for themselves that they get from you. And you will know when this is happening, because then they're manipulating you and they're emotionally exhausting you, because they're siphoning all of this energy, all of this emotion, the reactions out of you. That's what they need, because they have no sense of self. But you do, and that's why they have to get it from you. They have to get your life force that validates your real, true sense of self to validate their false self. But they will just keep pushing your boundaries. Whenever they see an opportunity, they will just keep pushing and pushing, because they need it. It's their food. They can't survive without it. And that's why it's best to distance yourself, walk away, remove yourself from their influence, limit contact, end the relationship. That can be the most empowering thing for you and the most disempowering thing for them. Because as long as you remain around them, it will drain the life out of you. They need your compliance. They need your emotional investment. But when you take that away from them, you then diminish their control. If you're finding this helpful so far, give it a thumbs up. Let's get this video out there so more can see it. But yeah, beating a narcissist, this is what you have to do. You got to set the boundaries. You got to walk away. You got to go no contact. That's how you beat them. That's how you win. Winning is not about confronting them or proving a point. You don't have anything to prove to them. And you can't prove anything to a narcissist. They're delusional. They just want to believe whatever is favorable for them, whatever makes them feel better about themselves. So your victory lies in preserving your mental and emotional well-being, minimizing their impact on your life, limiting their access to you and your energy, because that is how you resist them. Well, what's winning for them? Winning for a narcissist, it's just about maintaining power, control, influence, and admiration over you. And that's because their false sense of self-worth is based on external validation and having superiority over you. It's not genuine. It comes from you. So their success is defined by them dominating you, because they can only feel validated if they can control and manipulate you. Winning for them is about keeping you in a subordinate and dependent position, whether it's emotionally, socially, or professionally. Winning for a narcissist is about getting admiration and attention from you, because they thrive on being the center of attention. So they win by gaining your admiration and ensuring that you are constantly focused on them, which is often at the expense of other people around them or around you, because they have a false self. They have no true sense of self. So they've got to get external validation from you. But also the problem is, for you to validate them, for you to validate a false self, you also can't be you. Because if you're you, then you can't validate it. So it's also about gaslighting you and maintaining this illusion of superiority over you. Because then that's the only way that you can validate this self-constructed false self-image of them being special, unique, or superior to you. And their idea of winning is just about reinforcing this image, whether it's through accomplishments, status, or by degrading you. That's their idea of winning, to constantly prove themselves and to everyone else that they are above the rest. When really it's just all an illusion. They're not really superior. If they were superior, they wouldn't have to do what they do to you. They wouldn't have to keep you down. They wouldn't have to affect you. They wouldn't have to be superior to you. And that's why another sense of what gives them a sense of winning for them is avoiding vulnerability. Because they have a fragile self-esteem. They're very insecure. So their idea of winning, it means avoiding situations where they might otherwise be exposed as vulnerable or inadequate. To them, that means losing. And this is why they go to great lengths just to protect their fragile ego, to where they will gaslight, manipulate, or deceive you. So winning for a narcissist is really nothing good. It's about controlling people, ensuring that they get constant admiration so that they can maintain their sense of superiority and invulnerability. But remember, this is just a false sense in their minds. It has nothing to do with reality. They're not really superior, they're not really invulnerable, and they're not really worthy of admiration at all. But this is why they seek such a, they have such a need for power and validation. And this is what drives their interactions, to where they see people just as tools to fulfill these needs. So essentially, for a narcissist, their idea of winning is really just about continuing to destroy themselves. even though they may not be consciously intending to do that, that's really the effect that it has. By them having this need for power, validation, and control, it comes at the expense of their relationships, their emotional health, and even their long-term success. And it's because they have a constant need for validation. They engage in manipulative behaviors. And beneath this facade of superiority is emotional fragility, fragile self-esteem, where they just can't even deal with criticism or challenges to their self-image. They react with rage, defensiveness, or withdrawal. So they never actually improve anything. But to them, this emotional volatility means that to them it means that they're powerful. But beneath this facade of power is this emotional volatility, where they are actually very vulnerable to an internal collapse when their constructed identity is threatened. And we see that that's when they then rage at you, because their constructed identity is being threatened by you. And this is how, what I said earlier, for you to validate their false identity, you can't be you. And this is how they then strip your identity away from you and they discredit you. But yeah, another idea of winning for a narcissist is unstable relationships. For a narcissist, a relationship is transactional. They just see it as though people exist to serve their needs, as though they're the king, they're the emperor, they're the pharaoh, and you're just their peasants. That's how they see it. You're their servant. You exist to serve their needs. You're there for them. And this is a fantasy that they established in their minds, because in their minds, they're very special. They're unique. There's no one else like them. Which is kind of ironic, really, because, I mean, at this point in the world today, it's very difficult to find someone who's not like that. More often you find people like this more than you don't. So if anything, they're the opposite of special. They're the opposite of unique, which means that they're not entitled to special privileges because they're all exactly the same. But this is how they think. This is how they've constructed this fantasy in their minds of the sense of arrogance and entitlement and special privileges. But yeah, they tend to just have these unstable relationships that are transactional. And it's really just shallow, toxic connections without any real emotional support, which just leaves them feeling even more isolated, more misunderstood, and emotionally starved, which is counterproductive to what their goals were supposed to be. So it may appear as though they're winning in the short term, but gradually over time, they're actually just maintaining control. They're gaining admiration, which just prevents them from experiencing true sustainable fulfillment and meaningful connections, which is what they really wanted, what they were really looking for. But then that's what they don't actually get. And instead, they just settle for maintaining control and gaining admiration. So they don't really win what they really want. And it just ends up becoming this vicious cycle based off of a need for external validation and control, which then leads to personal destruction, emotionally and socially. But yeah, as I was saying, I mean, you know, how many people do actually have sustainable fulfillment or meaningful connections in this world anyway. I mean, very few people do. We live in a world where superficial interactions and individualistic values dominate. So it's very difficult for anyone, not just narcissists, to actually find emotional satisfaction or deep relationships. Because in this world today, it's mostly superficial relationships in a society that's driven by social media and fast-paced lifestyles. So most people just have relationships that are shallow and transactional, even though we are more connected than ever before. And many people feel lonelier than ever before because there's a lack of genuine face-to-face interactions. So true relationships are suffering because they're mediated by technology, or they're driven by social status and image. And yeah, these types of things really just destroy relationships. They destroy connection. They don't improve it. But this is what the narcissist settles for. Because short term, they really just focus on narcissistic supply, which really is just self-destructive. Yeah, Sentinel-87 has said that it's a loneliness epidemic. The two most common illnesses in the world are mental illnesses, such as anxiety and depression. It really is an epidemic. And, you know, there's really no connection there, because it's all just driven by validation, control, social status, and their false image. So it's all just about that instant gratification, instant validation. There's no real connection there. They don't even see the other person, and they don't even see themselves. It's just a tool to distract them from themselves, to disconnect, to validate their false image. And it just leaves them feeling even more miserable than before. And even culturally, I mean, the emphasis is just on achievements. People condition success with external achievements, such as their career status, material wealth, public recognition. All of these things just bring temporary satisfaction. They don't contribute to long-term happiness or emotional well-being. And in fact, they may have the opposite effect. Psychological studies actually show that true fulfillment are linked to intrinsic factors like self-acceptance, personal growth, and close, supportive relationships. So really, I mean, their narcissism is just a coping mechanism because they are struggling to cope. They're on a misguided search for fulfillment, which relies on external validation rather than internal peace. And while they may appear to be successful at garnering this excessive attention and admiration that they're looking for, it is just transactional and ultimately unfulfilling. So their narcissism really just serves as a coping and defense mechanism against their deep-seated insecurities. It does not lead to emotional satisfaction, which of course is what they are seeking. It's what they want, because they are suffering from inner emotional turmoil. So really, whatever happens, I mean, whatever you do, you're going to end up beating the narcissist regardless. Even if you don't do anything, whatever happens, the narcissist is going to lose. Unless they do go within, unless they do look within for the answers. But typically, of course, that's something they're never going to do. They're never going to have that self-awareness. They're never going to look within themselves. And they're just always going to be that way. They're always going to struggle. So the narcissist will always lose in the long run. Yes, they might experience short-term gains. They might gain attention, power, or admiration, which is what they're looking for. But their behavior typically leads to outcomes that are inherently self-destructive, because their fulfillment is dependent on external validation and manipulation. And this will not provide them with lasting satisfaction or genuine connection. And in fact, it will lead to emotional isolation because they push people away due to their manipulative behaviors, their lack of empathy, and their self-centered nature. So they will just end up alienating friends, family, and colleagues, which will lead to deep loneliness. Some narcissists may experience external success, but despite that, they will still feel emotionally empty, to where they will be unable to form authentic, meaningful relationships. And even narcissists who are grandiose, beneath that, they have a fragile ego. They have a fragile self-esteem. And that's why when their image or their sense of superiority is challenged, they can then react with this intense anger, defensiveness, or withdrawal. And they often have a tendency to burn bridges, which limits their ability to thrive in the long term. So narcissists really just experience a lack of true fulfillment, because their sense of worth is tied to admiration and validation from other people. And that's what really produces that self-destruction, from seeking admiration and validation externally, which is just, it's a social validation loop, where even though, yes, they may experience success externally, they're still seeking all of this externally from outside of themselves, and it's never going to complete them. They're never going to find true fulfillment. They're never going to find true connection, because connection doesn't come from that. So that will always be missing for them, because the external validation is often fleeting and unsustainable. They're never realistically always going to be the center of attention. And regardless, true fulfillment and happiness come from within, from accepting ourselves and personal growth, from having meaningful connections. Narcissists struggle with all of this, so they're unlikely to ever experience deep, lasting satisfaction that we might achieve through introspection and emotional connection. And that's really how we beat them. That's how we win. From having this introspection, reflecting on ourselves, connecting emotionally, all things that they cannot do. Because for them, it's just going to be more toxic cycles. They will continue to manipulate and exploit people to boost their self-esteem. And yeah, initially this may give them momentary advantages, but long term it will result in a pattern of distrust, broken relationships, and isolation. This cycle will be emotionally exhausting, until eventually they just find themselves alone and struggling to find genuine emotional support. So initially it may seem like they win temporarily by achieving power, attention, or success. But over time, because of their inability to foster deep connections or to maintain a stable, healthy sense of self, this ensures that they will face significant emotional and social losses, because their constant pursuit of external validation and dominance rarely ever leads to internal peace that can sustain long-term well-being. It's not going to lead to that for them. Of course, it may not appear that way. It may seem like they're the life of the party, they're the toast of the town, because they're often surrounded by enablers and flying monkeys, and they've always got supply. But this is all just superficial. It's all transactional. These are just people who passively support their behavior or aid them in maintaining their manipulation, which may give them the supply that they crave. It may give them attention, admiration, or power, but this is all just superficial and transactional at best. So it just leads to their destruction, both for them and for their new supply. Narcissists do tend to attract, or they manipulate, enablers. People who maybe lack awareness, or they're too afraid to challenge the narcissist's behavior. They may also have flying monkeys who actively work on the narcissist's behalf to harass their targets or to reinforce the narcissist's closed-minded worldview. And while these people may provide temporary support, they are unaware, or they're unwilling to acknowledge that they are actually being manipulated themselves. And typically this is what they project onto you, but they fail to see that within themselves. And how they're really just a pawn on the chessboard. They're just doing the narcissist's bidding. They have no real autonomy of themselves. And I've spoken about this, especially in my earlier videos many years ago. And the reality is that they will never awaken to this truth. They will always be asleep to that. And they will always just have superficial relationships. They will always just have relationships that are transactional, where they just use people for admiration, support, or resources, without actually offering genuine care or reciprocity. Because narcissists do not form deep, meaningful connections. It's not about mutual respect or emotional intimacy. So it will only last as long as they can maintain control, or as long as they can keep the supply flowing. But once their needs are met, or once their victim becomes aware of their manipulation tactics, the relationships will then break down. And even narcissists themselves, they typically just use and abuse people. They use them up and then they discard them. So even if they found someone who offered genuine care, support, or emotional connection, they would destroy them. They may keep them close initially to maintain as a source of validation, but gradually they will begin to devalue them. Because of course, someone who can offer genuine care, support, or emotional connection, that's going to threaten their control. Everything has to be fake, it has to be superficial, transactional, in order for them to keep it going. And also, someone who offers genuine care, support, and emotional connection, they're typically going to be less obedient. They're going to be more independent, all things that a narcissist cannot tolerate. So they're never going to have that. It's always going to be superficial. It's always going to be existing on the surface. It's never going to go deep. And it will always just lead to emotional abuse, manipulation, and distraction of whoever they're using, to where they will then experience isolation and long-term consequences. Because they're going to push away those who are capable of seeing through their manipulation, or people who refuse to provide them with constant validation. So in the long run, it really just leaves them surrounded by superficial, fake people who can only offer them temporary fulfillment. And while the narcissist may remain in these toxic cycles, it's very shallow, and it will fail to provide them with the depth that they're looking for. But the narcissist will continue to age and alienate people who truly care. So the narcissist will find themselves isolated, and they will just become increasingly dependent on the less reliable, more transactional sources of supply. So whatever you do, you're beating the narcissist. We win against the narcissist, whatever happened, because they just go on this this endless path of self-destruction. So it's really just an illusion of what you see initially from them in the beginning. Well, as for us, they challenge our natural superiority from offering this the true connection that we can offer to them. And that's why they're always very, very disruptive to our power, our natural power, our control, to which what they see as a threat, our dominance, to where they try to break us down, they try to crush us, and we just try to maintain order and control over them to keep the peace. But the result is theirs. I mean, they're just not having it. They don't want things to pan out in that way. And all we can do is just keep the peace and maintain our no contact and just let them continue as they want to. And regardless, they don't get the result that they're looking for. They do short term, but long term, it doesn't resolve the way that they want it to. So that's just how it goes for them. But for us, winning, beating the narcissist, it's about setting boundaries. It really is. I mean, not going into the power struggle, because they thrive on control and domination. And we just have to know when to walk away. So yeah, I hope you found this video helpful. This is what you have to do to beat a narcissist. It's all about distance. It's all about maintaining the no contact, protecting yourself emotionally. If you found it helpful, please give it a thumbs up. I really appreciate your support. And let me know your thoughts down below in the comments section. Donations greatly appreciated, no matter how small. You can donate to my PayPal, which is paypal.me/Narc Survivor. Thank you all for joining me on another Narc Survivor live video, and I will talk to you soon.